This is the last in a three-part series I'm doing on Thanksgiving. Last year, it had been 400 years since that first Thanksgiving. How much of the story do you remember? I wanted to refresh my memory, so I went to History.com. I think the story goes something like this. In the early 1600s, there was a group of radical separatists who were living in England. They believed that when the Anglican Church separated from the Catholic Church a century before, they hadn't gone far enough, but just replaced a corrupt pope with a lousy king. They were looking for religious freedom. A group of them actually tried to leave 13 years earlier, but the captain of the ship that they hired ratted them out, and a local militia seized the group, took their money, their books, and all their personal possessions. They were tried and held in custody. Eventually they were freed, and they fled to Leiden, Holland, where they settled because Holland was more accepting. In 1620 they tried again. More than half decided to stay behind and integrated into Dutch culture. Among those who stayed was John Robinson, known as the pastor to the Pilgrims. He sent them off in a moving ceremony saying, "I am convinced that the Lord has more truth yet to break forth out of His holy word." Do you believe that? That the Lord still has more truth yet to break forth out of His holy word? That the Lord still has great things to be done? There were 102 passengers and a crew of about 30. Historians say that there were really two groups. The separatist pilgrims were called the saints, and the others were called strangers. Which group would you have been in? Would you have been a saint or a stranger? There were also two ships that started out, the Mayflower and the Speedwell. The Speedwell was for the Pilgrims. It started taking on water very early on and didn't even make it out of the harbor, so they all crowded on the Mayflower. Do you remember the last time that you had to be flexible? They intended to go to Virginia, but changing ships, bad weather because they were sailing so late in the season, and a wrong turn in the Atlantic set them off course. They ended up at Cape Cod. They named the place Plymouth because that was the name of the place where they left, so apparently they didn't want to change everything. It was uninhabited because of the Great Dying. Diseases like cholera and smallpox that were brought over by other settlers had wiped out most of the native population. They spent about a month floating around, trying to decide whether to go back, stick to their original plan and go to Virginia, or head towards the Hudson. They finally decided that whatever they did, they would do it together, and they signed the Mayflower Compact. It also said that they would cooperate for the general good of the colony, that they would deal with issues by voting, that they would establish a constitution, and that voting would rule by majority. What if we still believed as strongly in the importance of working together for the general good as we do about voting and rule by majority? They arrived in late December, which they really should have thought through better because the first winter was really rough. Almost half of them didn't make it, and many of those who were affected were women and children. But enough of them did make it that in the summer of 1621 they were able to plant crops, and they were so grateful when the harvest came in that they wanted to celebrate. They were especially thankful for the help of natives like Squanto. William Bradford's account of that first celebration said that it lasted for 3 days, that it was mostly children in attendance, only 4 married women had made it that far, and that 5 deer were killed. So apparently the main course was venison. Turkey came along much later. Here's a thought. How many of the names of those pilgrims do you remember? Mostly, they are remembered for their gratitude. The thing that lasts is gratitude. If the thing that outlasts you is your gratitude, what would that be? What are you thankful for this Thanksgiving? This is our Wednesday, November 23rd edition of a video series we call Stronger Faith. Stay safe and be well, and may you have a very blessed Thanksgiving.